What are the enterprise-wide challenges in collecting KYC data?
So in terms of enterprise-wide challenges, I think for larger firms that have multiple lines of business, I believe the biggest challenge they face is really dealing with information silos. So collecting data in a siloed way. So basically, you know, if you've got a mortgage line of business, you've got a wealth planning line of business, you might have an asset management line of business. Each of those lines of businesses may be collecting KYC. They are probably all asking similar questions, but they might be doing it for the same client and retaining it on different platforms or different systems. So I think that's a large obstacle for businesses. It's largely inefficient. The other challenge for most businesses is just the amount of time it takes to onboard a client. I think Thomson Reuters did a study in 2017 where they've identified the average time to onboard a client is about 22 days. That's lost revenue. So the longer it takes to onboard a client in that whole process before you can actually approve an account for trading or for implementation is lost revenue. And then finally, of course, the amount of resources that it may take. Often these types of issues in terms of collecting KYC, they're highly intensive. There's multiple touch points between the back office and the client before the information is all collected. It's just very inefficient and may require a lot of people.
And what are some strategies that firms can think about in meeting this challenge?
So in terms of the responding or addressing the operational challenges as it relates to silos, I think being able to look at the data and look at the standardization of data and figure out how you're able to use systems to be able to take information that's commonly collected across multiple business lines, standardizing the collection of that information, and then being able to use systems to retain and store that information so that it can be shared across lines or leveraged that way. Another way would be just in the types of documentation that is being used, the types of questions that are being asked, being able to simplify what's being asked, so only asking for what is needed and only collecting what is required can also help to streamline.
Is it possible to have one platform for all key client data?
I think for smaller organizations, it may be possible because they typically have maybe only one line of business or one service or one product that they're dealing with, and so it makes that much simpler. I think for large organizations, it's a lot more difficult due to the complexity of the services and the products that they will offer. And so, in terms of trying to address the one platform issue, one approach might be to ensure that when you are collecting your data and using multiple systems, what you do is look for systems that will talk to each other and can be integrated. So, being able to have a basic common platform or a system that sort of will be your data warehouse, and then you can overlay other types of systems on top of that, maybe a system for reporting, a system for your asset management, your portfolio construction, etc.
Mm-hmm. Can a firm streamline the management of its client data and cut operational costs?
Absolutely. I believe that with systematization of the collection of KYC, you certainly have the opportunity to cut significant costs. You're going to cut significant costs both in terms of the amount of time it takes to onboard a client. If you have a system that is able to either leverage data that's been collected elsewhere, so you're not going back and repeating that effort, and also through the number of people that need to be, doing this particular function. So having more automation, again, standardizing data collection, so as not to be customized by line of business or a particular service is going to make a big difference in saving costs.
What are some of the problems with firms reusing the client data that they've collected across the enterprise?
So the biggest concern, I think, for a firm, if it wants to leverage data, is the privacy issue. And so it's really important for a firm to ensure that the privacy consideration is being done at the front of any implementation or any build. So starting with what kind of data are we collecting, what is the purpose of the data that we're collecting, is the data actually even subject to privacy laws? Not all data that you collect on a customer is going to be subject to privacy or is considered private information. And so being able to distinguish that information from other information that can be shared, I think, is very critical. And so, being able to, first of all, understand the jurisdiction in which you operate, because that's going to have a large bearing on your ability to share information, but also being able to parse out what is truly, information that's private versus information that essentially is not considered private and can be shared. And maybe that's all that is really required of other business lines to make use of that information.